video is going to be a little complicated, and I want to start this video by giving a disclaimer that there may be topics in this video that are hard for you to deal with if this is something that you have personally been exposed to, or if this is a topic that seems to trigger some other pieces of trauma or experience that you have had. So I do want to put that out there, that this video may be a little bit much for those who have had experience with this or those who are triggered by this particular topic. But I think this is a topic that I need to bring up as part of a dynamic, family dynamic that's pretty antisocial and unhealthy. And we've been talking a lot about unhealthy parents, unhealthy family dynamics. We've been talking a lot about personality disorders and psychosis and delusions. And this is a topic that can fit under that heading because it's something that tends to happen more often than we want to admit. And it's something that I see in my office a lot more than I would like to see. As a matter of fact, I'm contacted by Child Protective Services almost 2 to 3 times a month, with them asking me to take on cases and to partner with them and work with them when it comes to children who are being sexually abused or are in the middle of custody disputes with their families and things like that. So this is a topic that's pretty robust, and it's a situation that I think needs to be brought up a little bit more on this channel. So let's go ahead and jump in. I want to highlight, starting off, some statistics, and then I want to give you some potential reasons why an adult would ever do this to a child. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel, for all of you who are subscribed and participating. And for those who are new, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button so you can stick around with us and get notifications when I post new videos and to be a part of our growing and validating community. And let me introduce myself in case you're new. My name is Tamara, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist. I'm also licensed in mental health, and I specialize in treating children, teens, and families, as well as adults within my private practice who are dealing with trauma. Let's jump in. You know, this topic is pretty sensitive to me. And one of the reasons why is because my career was built on working with children who were either sexually, physically, or psychologically abused by their parent. I started off right after college in a residential treatment facility for children who had some kind of history of trauma. And for the most part, that particular trauma tended to be sexual, physical, or psychological abuse. Within this residential treatment facility, and on this particular floor, there were doors in hallways where children were housed in the bedrooms on a particular floor, and they were getting psychiatric treatment and education and housing, and they were also being protected from society, and society was also being protected from them because a lot of times in this particular residential treatment facility, there were kids that were dealing with anger management difficulties and explosivity, if there's any such word, or explosive tendencies. They were dealing with psychosis themselves. They were also dealing with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, self-harm, the list goes on. And many of those kiddos could not go back home because they were either abandoned to the agency, meaning that the parents didn't come back and pick them up on day of discharge. And so we had to work with Child Protective Services to get the child into foster care. Or, the kids were not able to go home because the parent was not psychologically or emotionally stable. So my career had started off in very intense, severe settings like that. And I worked in one residential treatment facility, I worked in another and another. And my first 6 years in the field was spent working with kids in those particular settings before I stepped down to a school setting. In these particular settings, I saw children grow up. I worked with kids who were 15, 16, 17, and they stayed there until they aged out of the system. What that means when you age out of the system is that the system can no longer provide you with services because you're at an adult age. So you've been there for so long, and now you're an adult, whether that's 18, 19, 20, or 21. Now it's time for you to move on. And so I've worked with those kiddos who have aged out of the system, and they have come back to me for psychotherapy as adults, and to watch the transformation and the transitioning of children who have been sexually abused by their parents or family member, is astounding, because a lot of these kids grow up to struggle in their own adult lives and in their adult relationships, and the parent or the family member who was abusing them is to blame 100%. Let me give you guys some research and some numbers to kind of help you conceptualize this topic a little bit better. There's an organization known as RAINN, RAINN. This organization basically provides statistics and information and support to adult children and teens who have been sexually abused by family members or anybody, parents, friends, teachers, coaches, unfortunately. Agency RAINN stands for Rape, Abuse, Incest Network, or National Network. I'm so sorry, I don't want to mess that up. It's Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. For families who are dealing with this particular topic, I think it's important to understand the numbers. So I want to go through the numbers, because I think there's a lot of families, there's a lot of people who say, well, that happened, but we're going to act like it didn't happen. Or, okay, Uncle Tommy did do that to you, but what would you gain by talking about this or bringing it out or being open about it, There's also some family members that feel like, okay, we're not going to mention this because there's more harm that could be done through the legal system than there is benefits. And that only does two things. One, it causes the person who has been sexually abused to feel that their issue is not important. It invalidates, it minimizes, it gaslights, and it prevents the individual from feeling some kind of healing. Not that the victim wants to always retaliate or see something done with the person who has sexually abused them, but it's important to keep in mind that that individual needs help. And in order to get that individual help, or in order to protect other people from that person who has abused somebody else, it's important to make sure that this comes out and that it isn't minimized or hidden. So I think videos like this and many others can be very helpful in encouraging open communication about this topic. Now let me give you some numbers. Okay, I keep saying that and I keep going off onto something else. Victims of sexual abuse are 4 times more likely, according to RAINN, to experience post-traumatic stress disorder as adults. They are 4 times more likely than the general population to experience post-traumatic stress disorder as adults. 82% of victims are female under the age of 18. Okay, that's a huge number. All right, so females under the age of 18 make up at least 82% of individuals who are sexually abused. And another huge number is 66% of children between the ages of 12 and 17 are also sexually abused. Okay, that's a huge number. If we look at our kids and how mature they look today, 12 is nothing. Sometimes 12 can pass for 15. I have a lot of kiddos come into my office who are 11, 12, 13, and they look like they could pass for 18, 19, 20. And for predators and pedophiles, that's exactly what they're looking for. I think it's important to also keep in mind that, people who molest and people who sexually abuse children, they have a problem themselves. Whether that's a moral issue or a problem with values, whether that's you're antisocial, you're a sociopath, a psychopath, you need help, or that's, you never really grew up, you have a dependent personality, you have an internal need for sex, for stimulation, and yet you can't get that from an adult because you can't mesh, you can't communicate with them. There are also some adults who regress in some ways emotionally and psychologically, and this is what they choose. And so it's really hard for us as normal adults to kind of wrap our minds around that. But I want to highlight here some potential reasons why. Let's start with the first reason. So I think the first reason, a lot of children end up sexually abused is because the adult is emotionally and psychologically unstable. I talk about emotionally detached parents a lot on this channel. Here's a video right here if you want to check that out. I also talk a lot about emotional incest on this channel. Here's a video right here if you want to check that out. Both of those topics are sensitive topics as well, because children do get sexually abused in those particular situations. You may have a father who has a really hard time communicating with his wife. You may have a mother who has a really hard time communicating with her husband, and she forces the child to meet those needs for her. She's sick, she's unstable, she's emotionally detached, and probably immature in a lot of ways. Very, very, very regressed in her or his development. Another reason is a genetic or biological predisposition. There are some families who are just biologically predisposed to being attracted to a specific thing. And sometimes that is a child, right? As hard as it is to conceptualize, sexual abuse can run in families, and it's not always because of genes and biology. Sometimes it's one family member was sexually abused and then they do the same thing to somebody else. Trauma can also be perpetuated through genes and biology. I talk about that right up here in this video that I did a couple years ago. Or the next reason I should say is control and power. And sometimes, an individual is so sick with a desire and a need to control that they will violate a child to get that power and control. Sometimes that adult is also so sadistic that they will try to harm another person, an ex-wife, an ex-husband, a family member who they're jealous of or angry with or resentful toward. They will try to get that person back, or they will try to harm that person by sexually abusing the child of that person or a child in that family. So power and control. Power and control is something that rapists also desire in a lot of cases. Stalkers as well, intimacy seekers. I talk about that right up here in this video here. They also pursue children and pursue adults for power and control. Okay. The next thing is easy access. As sick as it is and disgusting to think about, some people within families that are very, very, very dysfunctional and have a really deep and extensive history of trauma will violate sexually a child who is easy to access. It's easy to go to my daughter and violate than it is to just be with my wife. It is easier to violate that cousin over there because they are dealing with an intellectual disability. Sexual attraction to minors is also something that causes an adult to sexually abuse. And, those are pedophiles. Those are adults who are attracted to children. Now, there's some research that suggests that not all adults who are attracted to children act on their urges. There's an organization that does a lot of research in this area, and I'm going to mention that in a couple minutes. But there are some adults who are attracted to minors. As hard as that is to wrap your mind around, consider an innocent baby who is just beautiful and so sweet and lovable. And I tell my mom all the time, I love squishy babies. They're so sweet, so loving. And to think that they could be abused by an adult is just unfathomable. It's traumatic even for me vicariously to think about, to talk about, to hear about when I get these cases. Impulsivity and having a personality disorder is another thing that can cause an adult to sexually abuse a child. And lastly, manipulation of the child. I can groom you and get everything I want from you because I never got it from an adult. I never got it from my mother, my father. So I'm going to groom you and manipulate you, and then I'm going to hurt you because I need that. And sometimes there are some sick adults who will do that. Let's jump to some specific categories so you can get a little bit of understanding of what that is. Okay, so what do sexual abusers do to their victims? Well, they do a couple things. One is they bribe, they manipulate, and they use seduction. So I want you to think of those three things, okay? They bribe, they manipulate, and they use seduction. Basically, this is grooming. Grooming is a psychological term used to describe sexual abusers who engage in sucking up behaviors to win over the favor and the trust of the child. And what happens isn't always readily available. Maybe I shouldn't say readily available. I should say readily acknowledged by other adults in the environment, or some of the behaviors are not easy to observe. because sometimes grooming behavior could be very sneaky, sly, and tricky. Grooming behavior could be, I'm going to always allow you to call me when you're having a problem, and then I'm going to sweet talk you and give you gifts and give you all this affection so that you'll desire me in a way that's unhealthy. Grooming could also be things like, buying the child things and really giving them everything that they want in an attempt to create this false relationship so that they can get what they want as the pedophile, as the predator. Sometimes, even child abusers, and what I mean by that is children who abuse children, so adolescents or young kids who sexually abuse their siblings or other children, they also have a form of bribery and manipulation. They also have a form of grooming that they use as well, and it's becoming the child's best friend, being there for that child every time that child needs them. Okay, that is grooming. That grooming turns that child eventually into a slave in a sense, and it causes that child to feel obligated to that other person. And so it's easier for that pedophile, that predator, to sexually abuse at that point. Now, there's two categories to keep in mind. One is the fixated sexual abuser, and the other is the regressed sexual abuser. Now, the fixated sexual abuser can be categorized as a pedophile, as a predator, okay? These are long-term abusers. They have a long-term inherent sexual attraction to children. It is inborn. They have a desire to violate the child. That is just who they are. These particular adults are fixated on sexual gratification, and they get that from the child. So these are predators and pedophiles. Now, the regressed sexual abuser is a person who has experienced some kind of trauma or some kind of situation that has caused them to emotionally regress to a place of desiring that child. That child fits a need for that moment. Now, there's some research that suggests that, people who divorce, people who are dealing with huge transitions in their lives, may go to a child for sexual gratification. And that sounds probably to you and to me, it sounds like an excuse for the behavior, but really it's just describing a person's psychological makeup and what they're willing to do to get what they want. There's an organization that you guys probably have never heard of before, and it was an organization that I knew about several years ago while studying forensic psychology. I had been researching and doing research on and writing research papers on an organization known as NAMBLA, Northern American Boy Love Association. It is the most disgusting organization because the whole idea behind that is to reject laws that protect children in age of consent. So the organization may no longer be available online. It used to be, as of 2016, an underground kind of an organization where everybody kind of laid low, but in today's society it may not be available anymore. A lot of the members kind of scattered and left the group. But the whole idea behind the group is that these adult men who claim they're not homosexual men, they want to be able to have sex with and be intimate with boys who are underage. And the whole organization was there to normalize the sexual desires of men to have relationships with young boys. Hopefully they are no longer in operation. So I encourage you to do a little bit more research on that. Now, there are some researchers I will mention briefly who have done some research on this topic. One is Lisa Cohen. If I'm saying her name correctly, I'll give you her website, www.b4uact.org. This is a tough topic, and I struggled to produce this video, but I figured this video would be helpful to a lot of you. I am a trauma therapist, and I do deal with this a lot, and I know a lot of you have most likely dealt with it yourselves. So I think this video can be helpful, it can be useful, and giving you some clarity and understanding about this topic as a whole. Thank you so much for being with me today in this video and watching it. I encourage you to give it a thumbs up and go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you want to stick around with us and get more videos like this. In the next video, we're going to talk about psychotherapy from a trauma perspective. There's a lot of topics that we're going to talk about. We're going to switch gears here a little bit. We're going to come off of these topics and talk about some of the things that I think a lot of you can relate to, especially if you're seeing a therapist. I'll see you soon. Bye.